Hi, Diana.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us today. Would you do me a favor and just tell everyone your name and where you're from?
My name's Diana Jordan, and I came from Farmington to Howell. We've been here about 26 years now. My family bought a farm, and we put 4 houses in the 4 corners of the meadow of the farm, and that's where I'm at now, Howell, Michigan.
I love it. So, the theme of these stories are your salvation, and you have a very interesting story for us. Would you tell us how you got saved, what happened, and just that whole season in your life when you met Jesus and you decided to follow him?
Okay. I come from a family of very good parents, hardworking parents, but they didn't go to church. And when we moved to Farmington, when I was 8 years old, Mama seeked out a church, a little Baptist church in the subdivision, in the back of our subdivision. And she worked nights, Dad worked days. They didn't go, but she had Daddy drop us off. So I was one of those kids that was dropped off. And when I say us, I have 2 other sisters, so it's 3 girls in our family.
Okay.
And every Sunday, Dad would get up faithfully and drop us off at church. And then we could walk home afterwards through the subdivision.
Okay.
Because by then it was later. So probably at age 11, 10 and a half, 11, God started tugging on my heart. And in the Baptist church, there's always an altar call.
That's right.
Always, at the end of the sermon. And my heart would start to pound and pound and pound. And I knew God was pulling at me. And it bothered me, it worried me, I was afraid of it. And I knew what I needed to do, but I was afraid. So I would get up and get into the center aisle, and I would go to the bathroom. And I would stay there and hide until it was all over.
Yeah.
And I could hear that they were letting everybody go, and then we'd go and we'd run, we'd go through the sub and go home. And Daddy'd be waiting for us with donuts or whatever, rewarding us. And this one particular Sunday, I couldn't go to the bathroom and hide anymore. I knew I had to turn towards the altar, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, and I fell to the floor. So for me, it was traumatic.
Yeah.
I fell to that floor, and I asked Jesus to come into my heart. And in the Baptist church, they turn you around and introduce you to your new family, and then they all come up and they congratulate you.
Shake your hand.
Yes. Now my sisters, mind you, they can't leave without me because that's the rule. Daddy said you don't come home without each other. So they had to wait while everybody went by and congratulated me, and we're all crying. And so when that was over, we got set loose outside, and I ran as hard as I could through that subdivision. My sisters couldn't keep up with me, and I just ran. I wanted to go home and tell my parents that I was saved. I was saved, and I had given my heart to Jesus, and I burst through the door. My dad, I'll never forget it, he was standing at the stove flipping pancakes. Mom was sitting at the table. She had just gotten up. She worked nights and Dad worked days.
Yeah.
And I said, I've been saved. I've been saved. I asked Jesus in my heart. And my dad turned and looked at me and said, that's a bunch of hogwash. And my mom turned to my dad and said, that'll be enough, Paul. It quenched my spirit. And I knew right there that my dad wasn't saved. And it started a lifelong burden for his soul. But I went to my bedroom, and I stayed in my bedroom, and nothing was said. I was very quiet. Nothing was ever said about my salvation. Nobody talked about it. That was it. We didn't talk about it. So it was weeks later that my grandma was staying with us. She would come now and then, and she'd stay 1-2 months at our house, and then she'd move on to the next house. She loved the Lord with all her heart. She was a true Baptist woman. I mean, she was on fire.
Yeah.
She was not shy at all.
Baptist with a big B.
Oh, man. And so I'll never forget it. The door knocked and it opened and it was my Sunday school teacher. And I'm like, huh? And I was at the end of the hall and she opened the door and she said, now, mind you, I didn't tell Grandma that I was saved because it was just ended. There was no talk about my salvation in the house. So she didn't know that I went down the aisle. And so Mrs. Washburn said, I'm her, Diana's Sunday school teacher, and I've come to talk to her parents about her being baptized. She was following through, trying to follow through with my baptism, which I realize now that's the way it should be.
Right.
My grandma looked at her and said, you leave this house now. She kicked her off the porch and said, she will come to you when she's good and ready.
Okay.
Not when you're ready, when she's ready. But see, Grandma didn't know that I went down that aisle. And I ran to the bedroom and hid again, because it was like I did something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, you feel, that's how you feel. And my spirit was quenched again. And so, it didn't take long before Daddy announced that, well, if you girls don't want to go to church anymore, you don't need to, it's your choice, you're old enough to make your own decision. And so, we stopped going.
Mm.
And now, my walk was hindered.
Yeah.
And I didn't walk in fellowship with God.
Tell us more.
Well, that went on for probably 20, 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
I married my childhood sweetheart. I made decisions. I became what they call unevenly yoked. I married a man who wasn't a Christian. The marriage was in turmoil from day one.
Where'd you meet him?
He was a childhood sweetheart, lived right in our subdivision.
Okay.
And it was in turmoil. Of course, we drank with the friends, we hung with the wrong type of friends,
Mm-hmm.
smoked, did it all. Walked in the world. That's
Mhm.
how I walked.
It was
And-
probably hard because you didn't have that other side of someone from church to kind of gently guide you and
Right.
speak into your life.
Right. But God bless Mrs. Washburn. How she'd find me. It didn't matter where I was. She would find me and send a card, thinking of you, thinking about you,
Mm.
for years. And then I lost track of her. She lost track of me. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with that lady? Why does she keep trying to follow me?
Yeah.
But she was trying to mentor to me. So I walked in the world, worldly, and made wrong decisions, a lot of wrong decisions. And that marriage ended in divorce. He committed adultery, and I divorced him. Never had any children.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't even a year and a half later, I remarried another man, another non-Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to church, not in God's Word. I did go back and get baptized because the one husband, being Catholic, the priest wouldn't marry us unless you were baptized.
That's right. Yeah.
And I didn't want to be baptized in the Catholic Church, so I said, no, I'll go back to my church. And I went back to the little Baptist church and they baptized me.
Mhm.
And then I walked away again. I just wanted to get baptized and follow through.
Yeah.
So here I am in the second marriage. I'm in real estate now. I also had my cosmetology license, so I worked all the time.
You're a businesswoman.
I was busy.
You still are.
I still am. I'm still bending hair.
You told me, I don't know if this is premature, you had told me an interesting story about your life and some decisions that you had made that led you to some locations that were less than desirable. Would you share that with us?
Yes. So here I am in the second marriage, and it's going downhill again. And I remember I became so miserable that I cried out. I started to cry out to the Lord and said, what am I doing wrong?
Mm.
Why is my life going like this? Why is my marriage going like this? What am I doing wrong? And when I cried out to him, things started to change. I remember stopping by my mom and dad's house, and I had my beautiful Century 21 outfit on. My hair's all perfect. I'm in my little convertible, and I stopped to say hi to him, and then I would just stop in and then leave. My girlfriend called, and she says, come on over. We're going to have a barbecue and see what we've been doing to the house you sold to us. And I said, all right. I said, but she said, well, call Gary and tell him we're having a barbecue. So I tried to call him. He didn't answer. I couldn't get a hold of him. And I thought, well, I'll just stop by for a minute. So I pulled in. It was 95 degrees, hot. And she says, come on in here and get those clothes off. Here, let me give you something to wear. So she threw some clothes at me. I put my nice Century 21 outfit in the back seat and my high heels. And I started with a nice drink and a cigarette and walking around the yard with them. And they're putting sod in, and it's wet, and it's black dirt. So now I've got mud up almost to my knees.
Okay.
I'm barefoot. My feet are swelled from watching, showing houses all day.
Yeah.
And finally, I finished that drink, and I said, you know what, guys, I can't reach Gary. I've got to go home. I'm going to go home. Thanks a lot anyway. So I started home, and I got to Haggerty Road, and I made a wrong turn.
Farmington Hills.
Yes.
Okay.
And I decided to turn. No, at that time, I lived in Milford.
Mm-hmm.
I was married, and we had bought and sold houses. And I was in Milford. So I made that wrong turn, and I pulled into a driveway, and when I went to turn around, the police blocked me in. And I'm like, what's this about? He came to the car, and I said, officer, what have I done wrong? He said, well, we want to know what you're doing in this parking lot.
Oh.
I said, I'm just turning around. I made a wrong turn. He says, well, we had a breaking and entering in here last night. I said, oh. He says, have you been drinking? I said, well, yeah, I had a drink.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't tell him it was a big gulp.
Right.
Remember the old big gulp?
I sure do.
But I only had one drink, officer. He says, get out of the car. I said, I've only had one drink. He said, get out of the car, put your shoes on. I said, I can't get them on there. My feet are swollen. So I finally forced him on. He's doing walk the line, ABCs backwards, blowing this tube. He says, you're going to jail. And I'm like, Lord, why is this happening to me? Me? I know so many people who drink a lot more than I do and do a lot worse than I do. Why is this happening to me? They handcuffed me, put me in the back seat of the squad car, and they started off. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe they're not police. They're disguised, and they're going to kidnap me.
Yeah.
And so my heart's pounding, and I'm thinking, oh, dear Lord, help me, help me, help me. The next thing I know, we're pulling into the police parking lot, so I'm like, phew, they're police.
Oh, boy.
Thank goodness they're police.
Yeah.
Well, we got through the door at the police station, and there's this full-length mirror where you can see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I got a picture of myself. Here my hair is wild from being in the convertible, the wind. There's mud up halfway to my knees, so my feet are black in mud. She had given me a pair of shorts that were canary yellow hot pants and a t-shirt that had hands on giving the finger.
Okay.
And the saying on the shirt was, may the bird of paradise fly up your nose. I took a look at myself. I said, officer, I don't normally look like this. I don't. I just had a beautiful Century 21 outfit on not even an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. He said, yeah, right. I said, I get a phone call, right? He said, yep, there's the phone. So I thought, I got to get a hold of my cousin. He's an attorney. He'll get me out of this. But I don't know his number. I have to call my mom to get the number. Well, by now, Dad's probably gone to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So I called. I said, Mom, I need Steve's number. What for? I just need his number. What's wrong? Are you okay? What's happened? Are you in trouble? Mom, I got picked up for drinking and driving. You what? I said, don't wake Dad up. My goodness, Mom. I said, just give me Steve's number. She gives me the number. I hung up. I said, can I have one more number, one more phone call? And he says, go ahead. So I called my cousin. And I told him what happened. I said, you got to come and get me out of this. I said, I got myself in trouble. I got picked up for drinking. He says, well, how much did you have? I said, just one, Steve. And I didn't tell him it was a big gulp.
Mm-hmm.
Just one. He says, are you sure? I said, yep. He says, well, you tell them you want a blood test. And he said, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. I said, no, you got to come and get me. He says, well, I can't because what did you blow? And I asked the officer. He says, oh, yep, because he says, you've got to spend the night.
Okay.
So we hung up, and I said, I want a blood test. They take me to the hospital, handcuffed, And the doctor says, are you sure you want me to do this? And I said, my cousin, he says, how much did you drink? I said, just one drink. I didn't tell him it was a big gulp either. So he says, are you sure? Because if it comes back worse, it'll go against you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, nope, go ahead. Meanwhile, my sister got home from work. My dad was out of bed. My mom told him what happened. They get in the car. They called up to the police station. They told him they took me to the hospital. My dad's out in the hallway, and he's having a fit with these officers. My girl's not going to jail. I don't want people beating her up and let her get raped in there. And he says, sir, calm down. He says, you're watching too many movies. The doctor says, is that your dad out there? I said, yep. He says, go out there and calm him down. So I go down. I go, Dad, I'm okay. I'm okay. Just I'll call you tomorrow. I got to spend the night. And my dad and my sister both started at my feet and looked all the way to my face and said, what happened to you? Because remember, Dad saw me with a nice Century 21 outfit. Now I look like the wrath of God.
Yeah.
So
So
he
you had to
leaves, and I end up going to the jail. They unhandcuffed me, fingerprint, headed down the hall. And he takes me to a cell, and I said, oh, officer, I said, that's real small in there, and I have claustrophobia. I do. And I'm like, Lord, don't let him put me in here. Now I'm praying more than I've ever prayed. Lord, please don't let him put me in here. Why am I going through this? And he said, I'm sorry, young lady, that's where you're going to spend the night. You opened the door, pushed me in. I said, there's no furniture. He goes, that's right. This is called the dunk tank. And I thought, well, at least it's a quiet night. I said, can I even have a blanket? He says, yep. Threw a blanket at me. It had holes in it, and I swear the dog slept in it all night. I thought, I'll get under this blanket, and I'll just stay under this blanket till morning, and I'll pray. And I got under there, and guess who met me?
Who?
God come under that blanket with me.
Tell us more.
And I said, why am I here? He says, because this is what it took for me to get you alone, and you listened to me. And he said, and you know what else? You cried out to me and said, I need help. I'm at the end of myself. And he says, so I waited for you to cry out. I said, but I'm in jail. He says, that's right. He says, and this is where we're going to make a turnaround.
Wow.
And so I stayed under that blanket with God. And I just prayed all night. He says, you told me you're going to go to church. I said, I know. I'll look for a good church. Just get me out of this, Lord. And I pray I'll go to church. I swear I won't miss a Sunday. And you're supposed to be reading my word. I said, I know. And I've got a Bible at home. I'll start reading, Lord. Just get me out of this cell. And I'll read every day. And I fell asleep praying to God. And then all of a sudden I heard this huge commotion. I poked my head out and I looked at the clock outside the bars on the wall, and it was 3 a.m. Well, at 3 a.m., that's when the bars let out. And the commotion I was hearing were people being brought in. And I could hear this woman just screaming at the top of her lungs. I've never heard a loud woman like that, and the words that were coming out of her mouth were incredible. I've never heard anybody curse like that in my life, and she's spitting and she's kicking, and you can tell it's taken 3 guys to drag her down the hall, and I'm thinking, oh no, Lord, don't put her in here with me. No, don't, please, Lord, don't put her in here with me.
Right.
Next thing I hear that key turning in my door. And it opened, and they threw her in, shut the door. I didn't even see her. I'm under the blanket, and she's walking around this blanket, and she's cussing, and she's spitting, and she's kicking the blanket. And I remember my dad was a Marine, and he taught us girls how to take care of ourselves. So I'm thinking to myself, this woman is big. She's big. She's got to be 7, 8 foot tall and just as big around, and I'm going to get my fanny whooped tonight. But Daddy said, remember, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So when you hit them hard and bring them down like right now. I thought, all right, I'll wait till she's in front of me, and because she's going around me. And when she got to the front of me, I ripped that blanket off and I grabbed for her, and she was only about 4 foot tall and skinny as a rail and no shoes on.
Yeah.
And I've got her around the neck. I've got her, and I just looked at her and I said, where did you get a mouth like that? Do you eat with that mouth? She started to cry. I mean, she's crying. And she says, I just went for a couple of drinks at the bar and I stayed too long. I left my little children at home. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. You've left little children unattended at home? Yes. I said, hang on. Officer, we need some help down here. So they come running down and he says, what's going on? What's going on? I said, this lady went to the bar. She drank too much. She's left 3 little kids in her home, unattended. He says, not to worry. We already know about it. We've already taken care of it. And they walked away. And God said to me, witness to her. And I'm like, me? I don't know how to witness to anybody. My goodness, Lord, I'm in as bad a shape as she is. I'm drinking, look at me. And he said, witness to her. So I sat her down, we sat down on that slab, and I told her about Jesus, and I talked to her about her life, and I said, are you ready to change? Do you want your life to turn around? She goes, I sure would. I said, the only one that I know of that can do that for you is Jesus. Well, she knew about Jesus. I said, yeah, you know about him. You know about God, yeah. Do you believe? Well, I believe in him. I said, but did you ever ask them into your heart? She said, no. She said, how do I do that? Right into my hands. And I said, are you ready to do that? She goes, yes. I said, all right. And we prayed. I prayed the sinner's prayer with her. And we hugged one another. And we fell asleep in there. And we got up in the morning. And I said, you know, now what we got to do, you and I both. All of your sins are erased. You've got a new life starting out right now.
Yeah.
And we got to go and we got to find a church home, both of us. I don't know where you live. And get yourself a Bible. I got one, she said. I said, we got to open it up and start reading it.
Wow.
I don't know what her name was. I never met her again. But that was my first assignment that God gave me after I rededicated my life to him.
Amen. Isn't it amazing how God will open doors even when the jail door shuts?
Yes.
He opens a door,
Yes.
And sometimes love isn't convenient. Loving people, but that story, Diana, your testimony and your story is
And
amazing.
my first assignment was to lead someone to him.
Yeah, that's what he does.
My life turned around, I'll tell you. I went out of there and I went home. Of course, my husband wouldn't come pick me up, so Dad had to come get me. Dad picked me up and he drove in pure silence, took me to my car, put me in it, and he said, we'll talk later. He never brought that up again, ever. My dad never brought it up again, and I went home and I got in my bedroom, and the Lord and I spent 2 days together, him showing me the plan of what he wanted me to do. He led me to a church that had a preacher that was a police officer for 17 years, and he ran from God for 17 years, and he finally became a pastor. And that's who God put me under. And he preached from that pulpit like a preacher.
Good.
Like a cop. This is where the road is. Got my feet put on that narrow path, and I'm not saying I haven't gone into the ditch a couple times,
Sure.
but I realize now God never left me. I left him. He was always by my side, but I wouldn't take his hand. He would reach out and I would pull away like a little child. I want to do it myself. And I did it myself, but he was always there. And he orchestrated every bit of that happened to me.
Diane, I have just, this is broadcasted throughout the world. If there's someone watching this, what would you suggest to them if they are similar to your situation? What would you say to a younger Diana if you were able to go back in time and talk to her about Jesus?
I hope that this will encourage someone who has not been saved, that you need to, just to know God, to know who he is, to believe in all of that, but you have to ask him into your heart. He won't make you. He waits for you to come to him. He'll tug on your heart. But if you've not saved, ask him in. Don't wait. It's so simple. Call a preacher, call someone to help you. And if you are watching this and you've done that, but you haven't been walking with him, and Satan has had a field day slapping you around in this world, it's never too late. turn
Good.
it around, rededicate your life to the Lord, and get back on the right road.
Well, thank you for your time
Yeah.
today. I appreciate it.